Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast.
The podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
And now, your host, Dustin Jones.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast. Thank you for giving me your time today. I am excited for you to meet Lisa Maczura. For those of you on Twitter, this is at Lisa Mac and Cheese. She is a physical therapy patient. She is not a physical therapist. She is a patient. She lives out in Arizona, and she was one of the people that was on the patient panel at CSM this past year, which generated a lot of conversations, a lot of interest in possibly doing that again on a larger scale next year. Hopefully that'll happen. But she is very vulnerable with us and shares her story, her past experiences, her current situations, and just kind of her life right now. And just hearing her story is very helpful for people like you and me, because it's so easy to think we know what's going on, we know everything to consider, but that is hardly ever the case. So very thankful for Lisa coming onto the show, and you will be thankful as well after you listen to this. So without further ado, Lisa Maczura. Lisa Maczura, welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast. I appreciate your time.
And thanks so much for having me. I was real excited.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and apologize publicly. You probably have no idea what I'm about to say, but no. We were at CSM. Kyle Ridgway and I were leaving the Marriott bar, and I had a beer. And we were walking out, just talking about, what happened that night. And I see you, Jerry Durham, and Ann Wendell. Well, saying you, I didn't know it was you.
Right. Do you know what I said to her right before you showed up?
No.
I said to her, do you know this guy just, excuse me, I did it again, Dustin Jones?
Come on now.
And I mean, the words were still coming out of my mouth, and there you were. And I was just like, it's freaking PT.
That's insane. Yeah. So you're right there in that lobby area. And then I hear you say my name, and then, cause I knew you were coming in for the patient panel, and you were with Jerry Durham. So I knew it. Lisa Mac and Cheese. And you said, Dustin. And the first thing I did was just give you this big bear hug, and I just completely oblivious to any privacy or whatsoever. But I'm a hugger. I'm a hugger. So I need to apologize if that offended you or if that was awkward.
Not at all. Not at all. The only thing that worries me about hugging is basically since I went from 1 cane to 2.
Okay.
I figured if a PT hugs me, they'll know what to do if they can feel me go, ooh,
exactly.
To the other side. Here I'm safe. As long as they see me.
Yeah.
It's the part, do they see me? I mean, I was actually pretty worried about coming to the conference, not because I didn't think that my material was good or that it might be helpful, but just the sheer volume of people. That's why I tweeted out, listen, if you see a middle-aged woman with 2 canes, please look up from your phone. And it went as a joke, but also seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
And I actually ran into a few people who recognized me that way.
Wow, that's incredible.
Which really facilitated a couple of interesting conversations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited you're on the show because I really appreciate your perspective. And, many people that listen to this show have heard me talk about the patient panel that was at CSM this past year. You and I believe Aaron Jackson basically told your story from, when you first had your experiences with PT or the healthcare system and where you are now. And your perspectives were just very helpful. So I wanted to bring you on to talk a little bit more about those things and dig a little deeper into, some of the things that we've definitely talked about on Twitter for sure. But let's just start off, just kind of give us the general outline of your experiences with the world of physical therapy.
Early, late, or both?
Early on to where we are now.
Okay. All right. I have spastic cerebral palsy. I'm a twin. My twin sister was born normally. I was not. We were both, obviously both. We were premature by about 6 weeks. And my mother, being this was her 3rd and 4th kid venture.
Okay.
She noticed. She said right before we left the hospital that there was something. She told my dad, "There's something wrong with this one." And so she knew something was wrong early on. She's an experienced mom. And my great aunt, once it became apparent that I was not reaching milestones, referred my mother to Easter seals.
Okay.
And that was my initial foray into PT. And I believe I was about 1.5 then. We had no insurance, which wasn't particularly uncommon in that day. We were working class.
Yeah.
And they got me involved in Easter Seals kids programs. I was routinely monitored. I got braces. Was fitted with braces by an orthotist there. All this was pro bono. I'd see the PT and the ortho yearly, and I think probably more frequently than yearly when I was very small, but I don't really know the time frame.
Yeah.
I was put in a preschool class for disabled kids. I ended up in a grade school as I got older, which was a prototype for mainstreaming education. And as I mentioned in my talk at CSM, mainstreaming was not required. Education for disabled people in general was not required by law until 1975. And so I was already 10 years old by then. Yeah. So the elementary school I went to was half normal and half special ed. And we got PT on site probably not every day, probably a couple 3 times a week. Wow. On site at the school. And at second grade, I was partially mainstreamed, like half day. So I'd spend half day with one side, half day with another. And by third grade, I was fully mainstreamed. And I was not going to school with my sister. We went to separate districts because of that. And so I spent all my elementary school years basically by myself. And a bunch of other disabled kids who had disabilities that ran from CP to what appeared to me to be autism, although that wasn't a hot topic as it is now. Yeah. Maybe a couple kids with muscular dystrophy. One kid actually died in school one time. He was a dwarf and he was not ambulatory, and he was in a wheelchair, and one of the other ambulatory patients was pushing him, and he wasn't strapped in properly to his wheelchair, and he tumbled out of the chair and hit his head and died.
Wow.
And that's traumatic for anybody. Yeah. You don't like the idea of a kid dying, but when you're a little kid yourself and you're like, where's Frankie?
Yeah.
It's like, no, Frankie died. And we were all like, yeah, it was terrible. I don't know. I was kind of surprised I devolved to that. So at any rate, at the end of 6th grade, which in my era was the end of elementary school, I was told that I was finished with PT. They had gotten me up and walking. I had braces. I had canes. Actually, at that point, by 11, I think I was without the canes. I think I stopped canes at 10, but I still had braces. And
what were the braces? Could you explain them?
Yeah. Well, when I think I was fitted with braces at about 3, and they were full leather and steel braces from the hip down.
Okay.
Until I believe 1st or 2nd grade. And then they switched me to below the knee. And this wasn't the days of, molded light plastics. These were heavy mothers. Yeah. I was a little kid.
Oh, man.
For that reason, my dad was usually the one that carted me around, and mom corralled my sister when we went out and everything. And in a way, I'm kind of glad we were, I don't know how to put this. I'm kind of glad we were working class because my parents couldn't afford sitters. So that meant that us kids went everywhere. I mean, the concept of date night for parents didn't exist back then, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So we went everywhere. And it was great being a twin because I've never really asked my mother about this, but I've always felt that she felt safer letting me outside play because my sister was with me. And that if anything happened to either of us, the other one would go running, or in my case, yelling for help. So I know it's not like my mom still wasn't sticking her head out the window going, "Where are you?"
Yeah.
It wasn't that panicky helicopter parent sort of thing that I saw with some of my classmates, where they couldn't be let out of sight.
Wow.
Yeah,
so that 11 years old, you said, was when PT ended?
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of that had to do with it just being the end of the school year for me. And then there were no other programs in the junior high that I went to, which was the next step up for that school district.
Okay.
And basically, I don't remember the exact words. I'm not trying to vilify anybody, but it was basically like, hooray, you're done. Everything's great. You're walking. We needed to get you walking. Now you're walking.
Yeah.
And nobody really prepared me for either the physical changes later in life or the emotional and social changes that happened as I integrated or didn't integrate into school social life.
Yeah.
That was really hard.
What, at that point, I mean, I don't know if you remember back then, but what was your perception of, what the future looked like in terms of, having CP?
I don't remember when exactly the penny dropped for me, but my PTs, I don't even know if it was directly my PTs, but at least the school staff would say, do your exercises, get big and strong, kind of like the way people say, eat your vegetables. Well, if I do enough exercises, I'll get better.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in my talk, it's like, better doesn't mean no CP, but that's the way I understood it when I was younger. And I think by the time I finished elementary school, I had some inkling that wasn't going to fly, but I figured I'd be a lot better when I was older.
Yeah.
Like, barely noticeable kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a social fraud to protect the people who don't want to make you feel bad. And that's not in a patient's best interest. I mean, I understand the idea of protecting, I understand the idea of giving information at the developmental level that a kid can handle.
Yeah.
But I don't remember any point at which anybody said to me, this is permanent. We're here to help you. It'll get better, but it won't get perfect. And for a while, I expected it to be perfect. And it was really by the time I was 15 that I figured out I'd been lied to.
Wow.
With the best of intentions,
right?
But I'd still been lied to, or things had been omitted so that it was just as good as a lie.
Yeah. As the years have progressed, for you personally, what have been, just some of the big challenges as you've aged and worked a pretty successful career, doing some awesome work that you were just telling me about. What have been some of the challenges in your situation?
Well, when I was 19, I transferred from a liberal arts college near my home to Temple University. So I lived in Philadelphia for 9 years. And until from 19 to 24, I was running all around town with my friends, taking the subway all the time, managing the stairs, managing the trains. I don't know if you know this, but trains move. And
we don't have those in West Virginia, except they carry coal, not people.
You've seen them on TV.
Yeah.
You can extrapolate.
Right.
Trains move. That's a challenge for balance. But it was not a huge problem for me. I'd walk around downtown all the time. I'd take the subway every day to work and home. It wasn't a big deal. I had to be careful of crowds, and I was slower on the stairs, but it wasn't a big deal. So aging for me started essentially at 24. And at 29, I kind of hit a wall. I was so freaking tired all the time. I'd had a botched triple arthrodesis at 15. Yeah, at 15 in 1980. Wow. And they did a single incision. And for triple arthrodesis, you're supposed to do a double incision. I don't know if that's something that's just a more recent medical fact. And if they just didn't know, or if the guy was just incompetent, I don't know. He's long since dead. But I ended up with arthritis in that foot. And I didn't know that's what it was. I knew I had problems, but I knew the two were related, the surgery and the pain, but it didn't equate it with arthritis. And if you walk everywhere in Philadelphia or in any city, it's exhausting. Yeah. And by the time I hit 29 or 28, I was just like, I love this city. I love big cities. Like I can't quite even explain to you. I blend in more, but I was just like, I have to get out, or I'd come home and I'd just be like in tears because I'm just so freaking tired. Yeah. And I'm 29. And I'm like, this shouldn't be happening to me. I don't know why this is happening. This is non-progressive. Yeah.
Really?
The great lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
did you think I need physical therapy at that stage?
No. As far as I was concerned, they dumped me. And everybody said that, that was as much as could be done. What I didn't understand at that point was that there was no real connection on a daily basis between ortho and PT, meaning orthopedics and PT.
Okay, the physicians and
the physicians
therapists.
Yeah. Because when I was in Easter Seals, we saw everybody the same day because that's how pro bono works. You just go down the line with whoever you need to see. And I just assumed they were all working together. So when doctors told me there's nothing really we can do for you, I assumed that meant the PT wasn't going to help. But also I was biased against PT at that point because I felt like I'd been put to pasture.
Yeah.
Who wants to feel like they've peaked when they're 11?
Yeah.
You'd like to think you have some life and abilities before you hit puberty. That would be great.
Gosh. So 29 years old, you're exhausted. You're starting to develop some foot pain or arthritis and whatnot. What did you think about your later years, and what did you think those later years were going to look like?
Only in a vague, abstract sort of way, as people in their 20s do. I mean, when I was 24, I switched from no canes to one cane, and then at 29, I moved to Arizona.
Yeah,
and then at about 44. Well, at 43, I was in a car accident and I broke my right hip. Okay, everybody thinks I slipped in the shower. No, crippled people have motor vehicle accidents too. So I'm partially titanium. And what happened was I broke the hip in an accident in Georgia, which is way far away from where I live. I was visiting friends and family, and we were T-boned. And I talked to the guy before they put me under. I said, listen, have you done this before? And he says, oh, yeah, about 200 times. I said, have you done this before on anybody with CP? He said, no. And so the guy that was operating on me had never seen me stand, had never seen me walk. I'm sure he had a fair idea of what my issues were because you can tell something from supine. But so what happened was he repaired everything and did a decent job, but it left me with my balance being quite a bit more off kilter than it would otherwise be. And my home ortho told me that he thinks that what they were doing was trying to preserve blood supply and so had to sacrifice some movement.
Did you get therapy after that?
No, nothing.
Really?
I was literally told there was no point.
I'm sorry, when was this roughly? I'm losing my
This was, I think I was 43, so that would have been 8 years ago.
Yeah, 8 years ago.
Yeah. I was literally told there's no point. I mean, by the surgeon, and I'm like, how can I not need rehab? But I took their word for it. Yeah. It's not like it had been countered with any other person piping up going, oh no, this would be a good idea. Yeah. Nothing.
So that was 8 years ago. And now, you're doing physical therapy. When did you start working with Eric? And go ahead and tell us about that hunk of a man, Eric Christensen.
Yeah. Props to the wife. I went to see him, and this is going to sound very boring vanilla, but I'm sure you'll understand it. I had low back pain, which is like, the most normal thing that people go to PT for. But I had low back pain because I had really bad hip flexors. I mean, not just bad, but really bad. Of course, at that point, I didn't know it. I didn't know that's what was happening. So I went to my physician, and they sent me to a back spine center, and they sent me off for an MRI, which was jarring when you're spastic. All the noises just kept flinching, and the tech was not happy with me. And so they said, well, your spine looks great. And they even showed me the films after they came back to the spine doc. And I can even tell you that's great. All the discs look fat and happy, and nothing looks. I mean, I can't read an X-ray to save my life, but I knew that looked good. Yeah. And they're like, you need PT, and I'm like, oh God, I had all these fears of being 10, and it's like all of a sudden you're a kid again. It's like when you go back to visit your parents. It's like, oh yeah. It's like, I'm a competent adult, but suddenly I don't feel like.
Yeah.
So I picked his name off a list of what was convenient to me. I think he's about maybe 8 miles, maybe a little bit more from where I live, and I was really scared. I mean, I was panicky because I was like, I don't know what this is going to be like. If this doesn't work, what's going to happen? Am I going to end up in a brace? What happens if I can't work?
Yeah.
I'm the youngest in my family. I have no children. No one lives near me. I didn't plan it that way. They just moved away. Now I'm the one who has to take care of me.
Yeah.
And it was a really both scary and humbling moment to have him do an eval on me because I felt very exposed. And that wasn't anything that he projected. It was just all of a sudden I'm a little kid and everybody knows more than me and my body's impossible. And he got really focused like in a second and did a very thorough eval. And in a few weeks, in less than a few weeks, I knew that he was going to be okay and that he could help. And more to the point, I had no idea how he was going to help at that point. Wow. But I just knew that he cared and that if he cared, I was going to be okay.
So can you give us some specifics, thinking about that time frame when, you first met him in those first few weeks, that you trusted him? You mentioned that he cared, but just practically for the listeners, what were some of the characteristics about him that really allowed you to trust him?
I think it was time and effort. I could kind of feel him thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, it was me, him, and one tech that was just observing. Okay. And we were in an open room. It wasn't private, which, I'd take issue with now, but we've moved to a bigger facility. He's moved, listen to me, we've moved.
Yeah.
He's moved to a bigger facility. So all evals take place in private. But at that point, he wasn't, wasn't his dog and pony show. So the evals were done in public. Yeah. And I'm laying there on the table thinking, oh my God. And he was it was like everybody else disappeared but me. And he was just very focused. He moved me very slowly. There was no panic in his voice. There was no, what do I do now? I didn't sense anything from him other than I'm here to help and I will figure this damn thing out. Like one of the things I mentioned in my talk, and I can't explain how important this was to me, but I'll say it again because it was. He had me lay on my side, bend both knees, and he did this on both sides. Lay on my side, bend both knees, and he said, lift your top leg. And I couldn't do it. I mean, not a quiver, nothing. I was that tight. I'm assuming that means he was testing my adductors. Is that?
Yeah, you could test the length of the adductors, and he could have been testing to see how strong your abductors were as well.
Yeah. So one of those, and I couldn't move at all. And I'm like dying of embarrassment, but I was like, I'm telling my brain to do this and my body is not cooperating. And I'm really embarrassed. I've got these two guys sitting with me and he was just like really calm. Yeah. It's so important to be calm. Even if your brain is like going a mile a minute. Oh God, what am I going to do now? I don't want to look stupid in front of a patient.
Yeah.
It's so important to be calm, And then we did the PNF contract relax thing. He literally put his hands between my knees flat. And he said, okay, so squeeze on my hand as hard as you can. And when I did that for a couple seconds, I could lift it maybe like an inch, and that was, it was bizarre that I couldn't lift it at all before, but it was even more bizarre to know that after just that simple intervention, I could do a little bit. And we flipped and on the other side wasn't quite as tight. So that was a little more responsive.
Yeah. So you had an early victory.
Yeah. Well, what that told me is I'm not hopeless.
Yeah.
And he wasn't freaking out and going, oh my God, I'm ortho, she's neuro. Why don't I just write a note to somebody and farm around? At that point, I didn't know diddly squat about neuro. I mean, I had a big notion that I was neurologically involved, but I had no idea that there was this grand divide between neuro, which I'm sorry. That just doesn't fly with me anymore. I know a little too much.
Yeah.
Sorry,
keep going.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
What he did, just in that those couple of weeks, had you experienced that from other healthcare providers? Just that time and that just calmness to him, and just you kind of feeling that he's going to do everything he can to figure out how he can help you.
Well, not as an adult, because he was the first PT I had seen as an adult.
Yeah.
When you're a
what
kid,
about healthcare providers in general?
I have a good ortho.
Okay.
And I have doctors. I've had doctors over the year who I connect better and worse with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because PT is so critical for me now, and I understand why that is now, that no, nobody needs to have that kind of, well, at least as a popularly understood healthcare system works now, nobody needs to have that kind of focus, which of course they all do, but you usually get 10 or 15 minutes with a doc. Yeah. Although I've trained my ortho that it's going to be a half an hour conversation whether you want it to be or not. He actually likes that. I'm a break when he comes, I think. Maybe that's a seat on the part.
That's awesome. So you mentioned, some of the conversations that go on Twitter, many topics, and I always appreciate when you're in on those conversations, because you just bring a fresh light to many of the things that we all bicker about or argue about. Debate, I guess that's a better word.
Okay.
What are some other things? What other themes on Twitter really potentially frustrate you or grind your gears a little bit?
Well, I think it's maybe part of the society at large. This, how would you put it? It's kind of fetishism of the worship of youth and of health, and I think there's a place for that.
Yeah.
But let me backtrack a little bit. When I was a kid in school, the last thing you'd see is the special class kids with the jocks. And that's the dynamic in a lot of ways, if you want to oversimplify it.
Yeah.
That's the dynamic. I mean, we're being asked to be in a room with people who are presumably at the peak of their physical capabilities. They're young, they're strong, they're fast. And then we're being asked to be in that room where, coming up, growing up, we didn't have anything in common. And now we're sort of, we're diametrically opposed in terms of our physical capability. And now we're being asked to get along. And it's just like, yes, that can happen. And it does happen all the time. But I think acknowledging the fact that we're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum might encourage a little bit more dialogue.
Yeah. That makes me think of on Twitter, this was a couple of days ago, I think, tweet out a picture of a slide that I had in a presentation I was given to a bunch of athletic trainers, and it was a quote from Tim DeFrancesco, and something I've echoed and several other PTs have echoed.
I'm sure he's a very nice guy.
Oh, he's awesome. He's awesome. Okay. You'd love him.
Okay.
But the quote was, "All athletes are humans, and all humans are athletes." How did that make you feel?
Honestly, I knew people meant well, so I didn't want to completely last anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's paternalistic. It's I'm being talked down to.
Yeah.
Like I'm too stupid to know that my body's broken.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and I posted, it's like calling me an athlete is an insult to athletes. And I believe that.
Yeah.
If being an athlete to you as a PT, maybe not you personally, but to anybody as a PT, if being a high functioning athlete is the pinnacle of what you see as important, then I just don't see where I fit. I think that kind of statement is something that's said to make the providers feel better, but has nothing to do with making the patients feel better.
Yeah. And you brought that up. I think Ann Wendell echoed the same thing in that conversation. And that,
she and I have had a few conversations, and I explained more to her about that.
Yeah, and that's super helpful, because I know, like, we blast this stuff out on the internet, and for those listeners that are not on Twitter, you need to be a part of these conversations. There's some amazing conversations going on about these types of issues, but we put this stuff out. And it's mainly, we just see it as we're just talking to clinicians. And for me personally, I often leave the patient out, like with that tweet, for example, it was more, directed to the clinician per se.
Sure.
And it is interesting because
I'm smart enough to know that.
yeah, well, yeah. I knew you're aware of that, but just how it's just interesting of how should I say this? Just the general culture of PT, especially with a lot of the people that are active on social media. It's heavy ortho, it's heavy sports, and that's been my experience in school as well, and just talking with a lot of my peers. And I mean, you've mentioned this before, but it's almost like the other types of patients are less valuable, and that should be further from the case. But so many people want to work with athletes. And so I feel like speaking most people's languages in terms of athletes or sports and getting them to think about their patients and how they can reach their goals, whether, they have different sports per se. Some people's goals are athletic sports are going to be different from others, but just using that terminology, it's easy for us to see that as harmless. But it's just so helpful to hear from you to say, hey, like,
right.
Unless some people don't want to hear that.
Right. Unless gym class destroyed your will to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing that phrase a lot more. And, part of me is like, yes, for me, from the geriatric point of view, I really like that because I feel like it urges most people to view geriatrics in a different light, to see we can challenge older adults. We can get them stronger. We can get them more mobile. We can help them achieve their goals. We don't need to baby them and to basically undertreat them. But I'm just really appreciative of the other side of the coin of, some patients could care less about athletics and some don't want to be even compared to that. So
right. I'm not a part of that venue. I'm not trying to be a part of that venue. Yeah. If I want to push myself physically, I trust Eric, my PT.
Yeah.
To know what I can handle. And I mean, we've built a relationship. So he knows how far he can push me. He knows most of the time he knows when something's too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel safe with him. That doesn't mean I feel safe with the PT world in general.
Yeah.
They haven't earned the right to project that onto me.
Yeah.
So.
Another thing that we've talked about is just kind of the divide of the different kind of specialties in PT. I mean, you mentioned the ortho neuro divide, and I've been very interested to hear your perspective on a specialty or research or people kind of diving into something that you're dealing with. Just having CP for so long that I think you mentioned on Jerry Durham's podcast, probably the first or second generation that's lived this long in these conditions. And do you feel like us as PTs, are we serving you well in that regard? Do you feel like many PTs are prepared to work with people that are in your situation?
I don't think that they think they're prepared. I think for 90% of what neuro patients go through, they're fully prepared. They just don't think they are. And there's always going to be the hard case where you're like, I'm really out of my depth and I really need to refer out because I don't feel I can do good for this patient.
Yeah.
But I don't think 90% of the time it's as big a deal as some people want to make it. It was like when I started with Eric, he told me before too long that basically the protocol for treating someone with CP is the same or close to the same as treating someone who's had a stroke. Everybody knows it's someone who's had a stroke.
Yeah.
It's neuro, but it's not the big, scary other kind of neuro.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody would say, well, I can't help them because I don't have the right equipment. What? You don't have a Hoyer lift? You know what my special equipment involves? My special equipment at home involves a foam roll, a big red physio ball, a stretch strap, and a couple of 5-pound weights, which you would probably say would be too light for me.
It depends.
I don't necessarily, with that last bit, I don't necessarily disagree, but I have to counterbalance that with the lack of balance.
Right.
So there you go.
Wow.
I think people make it complicated because neuro patients scare them. And I think there's still a learning curve as far as understanding that neuropatients are people.
Yeah.
Whether they walk funny or talk funny or, have intellectual disabilities, everybody deserves a life as good a life as they can have. And your job as a PT is not to fit them into a mold of what you think the physical ideal is, of your physical ideal. You can hold yourself up as a model for persistence and dedication, but you're supposed to be, and I was mentioning this to Sandy and the world at large on Twitter, Hilton and Ann Wendell yesterday. It's like, your job is not to make me the best you. Your job is to make me the best me. And you've got to work with the raw material you have, not with the raw material you wish you had.
Yeah.
And believe me, when PTs are nervous about dealing with whatever population they're not the most comfortable with, patients know that. They're not stupid, especially ones that are chronic. They've been through the ringer.
Yeah.
It's not like you're hiding anything behind your polo shirt. I understand there's a movement to remove.
Yes, no polos.
Doesn't upset me at all.
Yeah, I'm a former athletic trainer, so I have a fondness for polo shirts. But Gene Shirakabrad's helping me merge towards the button-ups.
Yeah.
So
he's a man on a mission. Did you see the Star Wars parody that he and Ben did?
Yeah. My gosh.
Oh my gosh.
That was great.
I couldn't believe they got Mr. Wonderful Adam Meakin to participate.
He's a character. Back to what were you? You were talking about something that reminded me in the Jerry's interview when the conversation you had with Sandy and Ann about how we should be pursuing your goals or your wishes and not our wishes. That interview with Jerry Durham, I think it was Aaron Jackson was telling her story, and Jerry's response was, after Aaron told her story about someone recommending a certain plan of care without even seeing or talking to her, Jerry Durham considered that unethical.
Right.
And
sure.
And it'd be hard to disagree with him, especially if we actually put ourselves in the position of a patient. But man, how common is that? Even for me, I'm definitely guilty of this. Not as much now as what I used to, for sure. But yeah, we get in our head of what would be best for the patient from our perspective. But in reality, that's not.
It's
not
all
the case.
To have those ideas because you have a knowledge base that most patients don't.
Yeah.
But don't start there. Start with what they want. Ask them, what do you want? What are you hoping will happen with PT? What's your experience been with PT, not only in the past, if you've had PT in the past, not only physically, but how have you been treated socially? Not necessarily emotionally, because if you throw that word emotion out there, people get all clammed up and stuff like that. But just kind of like, how did they treat you? Did you like the people that you worked with before? What worked, what didn't? Don't give them a yes or no question. Oh, please, God, open-ended questions. You want information, you got to make the questions broad. And then as you get answers, you get more specific. Do you mean this?
Yeah. How can I see 4 patients in an hour when I'm asking open-ended questions, Lisa? I'm kidding.
I can't answer everything for you.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm interested. Since you've been quite the patient voice in the PT Twitter world, what has been encouraging for you in terms of just seeing how we PTs communicate what we talk about? What's been encouraging from the patient perspective?
From a patient perspective, I'm loving to see all the student involvement. There are some patients that are going to be leery about having maybe a student PT work on them. I'm not one of those people. I absolutely love it. Completely love it. Because you've got them captive. You've got an audience of one. They can't go anywhere. They have to listen to you. And I'm not a woman that has trouble expounding on her opinions, as Eric will tell you. I think that's one of the more exciting things. It's it's also been exciting to talk to people like Sandy and Ann Wendell,
Yeah.
who are really trying very hard, just in private conversations and in public ones on Twitter, are really trying hard to understand how they can improve the profession, that it's not just about, paying off your student loans and getting that great big clinic and stuff like that. I mean, there are definitely, like Stan Haiti, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like Justin Dunaway and I worked together. I worked a little bit at the tail end. He worked a lot more for several years with Sean Flanagan, with the Manual Physical Therapy Alliance, and then Justin went off to the Stan Haiti Project, and he's got a video. You guys have to watch this video. I mean, I sit there and I'm like almost in tears. I'm like, I wish I could go, but I don't have any PT skills and I can't walk on floors that aren't flat.
I'll put a link to the video in the show notes. Tell us about Stan Haiti. Just a brief.
Well, I've never been there, but it's his cooperative project with the people of Haiti to start a rehabilitation clinic, which they've done, although it's, as I understand it last, it's slowly being outfitted, and they're in great need of funds to outfit it properly. It's his cooperative effort with the people of Haiti who have no PT at all, no PT schools at all. Justin gathers PT students and DPTs on vacation to come and work with the local population who are in dire need of PT services for 2 or 3 weeks, several times a year. And the goal is they're doing training for local nursing students, as I understand, because there are no PT schools. They're working with the medical professionals that they have, so that eventually the clinic will be self-sustaining and run by Haitians rather than outsiders coming in. And he wants to, as you'll see in the video for Stan Haiti, which was just out like the last week or two, he wants to make that a prototype for other countries to use as a template for providing PT service providing PT services to underserved populations.
That's awesome.
Which I just think is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm sorry about it.
That's cool. I'll definitely include that in the show notes.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
So, all right, let's wrap things up. I want to ask you. It's the last question I ask every interviewee.
I saw your interview with Peony. I thought she was great.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing. If I could have a glass of wine or a beer with her every week, I'd be a happy man. But she's busy. My gosh. Busy woman. Hard to get a hold of.
Doesn't surprise me given her attitude. That's
Okay. Well, let's say you're at CSM. Mm-hmm. You have every geriatric rehab clinician in the room. You have 30 seconds to a minute. What would you want to tell
them? My elevator speech?
Your elevator speech, yes.
Yeah. Just remember that every patient you treat was once young. And where they are, you will be. And so some empathy is in order, and maybe a couple doses of empathy, not saying that PTs that are in geriatrics aren't empathetic. I think by definition, they would almost have to be. But just to continue in that and remember, we're finite. We have to do what good we can on the planet while we can. And you can receive as much help from them in terms of perspective on life and just moral support from your patients as you can be for them. It's not a one-way thing. It's a two-way street. And that goes for any patient, but I think it becomes more critical as you have older patients. Yeah. And that's one of the things that impresses me about your work. It's just, how many times you're the only young PT that I've seen that has done work with geriatrics that's on Twitter. At least it's vocal about it. And I was so relieved. He's like, I'm a 15-year-old, basically candy striper at the local nursing home, and I'm like having a great time with Florence Connolly. I still remember her name. Had very severe arthritis, couldn't take care of herself. She was the best friend I ever had for several months, and it was just like, there needs to be empathy, but not just in the official context, in the idea that we're all human and that we need to support each other even when it's hard.
Amen. Amen to that. And honestly, I think a lot of that could be assisted by just, spending time. And I'm thinking of the older adults that you referenced. So just spending time with people. But the unfortunate thing that seems to be the theme is that so many older adults, especially if they have a tough time getting around, I mean, they're basically invisible to society. Whether, they're in a nursing home, assisted living facility, or in a house or apartment that they can't get out of. And that's a challenge.
And that's one of the things that attracts me to older people, because I'm going through a lot of the same things that they are, but I'm younger. It's like, who will take care of me when I'm old?
Yeah.
I'm the youngest in my family. I have no kids,
Yeah. All right, Lisa Maczura, I appreciate your time and just being really open with me and many others. If people have questions for you, tell us your Twitter handle.
It's at Lisa Mac, so LISAMAC, the letter N, and the word cheese, all spelled out normally. Yes. Lisa Mac, N, cheese.
Yeah, and that's how I referenced you when I first saw you at CSM. I'm an idiot.
All good.
All right. Thanks again for your time, and keep doing what you're doing. Keep asking questions, giving the patient perspective, and definitely in all these Twitter conversations, because we need it, especially dumb people like me.
No. You're doing great. Thanks again, dear.
Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. The show notes for this episode and much, much more can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. If you found value in this conversation, please share this with one other person that could benefit. And until next time, do not forget to stay funky.